I have a witchy, ghosty experience to share with you that happened to my family about 20 years ago. Back in the early 2000s, my parents, Dad, Lee, and Mum, Lana, used to go on ghost hunts around the New Forest, UK. This one night, around 1 a.m, they headed out to Burley, to the witch hanging tree up the side of the Coven of Witches, a shop in Burley that offers a variety of esoteric goods, including crystals, spellbooks, and other mystical items. Next to the shop is a path that leads you deep into the woods and eventually leads you to the hanging tree. Every time I went near that path, I got chills and always refused to go anywhere near it. It just didn't feel right. They headed up the path that they've done many times before. They knew it like the back of their hand. When they got to the halfway point, my mum started to get a cold wave ripple through her body, which made her stop dead in her tracks. My dad, confused, stopped and asked what was wrong, to which she responded with, "I'm not sure, but I don't think we should go any further this time." Dad didn't. You should always listen. Dad didn't listen and just brushed it off her nerves, as it had been a while since they'd been to this area. Dad decided to get the camera out and some of the equipment to make note of what Mum was feeling and to see if anyone or anything had anything to say to them. They didn't notice anything at the time, so they carried on their way. Once they reached the hanging tree, they started to hear a low growl and crunching of leaves and sticks surrounding them. "Who's there?" my dad shouted. No reply. They set up their equipment ready to try and contact some of the poor women that were hung at this spot. While Dad's setting up, my mum decided to look back at the video they'd recorded earlier on. And what she heard chilled her to the bone. A woman's voice, a deep whisper that sounded as if it was right behind the camera, right behind my dad. "Fuck off!" Mum dropped the camera in shock. At the exact same time, my dad, who was on the other side of the tree, heard the growl again, and then all of a sudden, he shouted out in pain. Pulls his sleeve up to discover 11 red, raw claw marks running down his arm, from his shoulder to his wrist. The scratches are wrapping around his arm, doing like a helter-skelter. I don't like that at all. It looked as if someone had grabbed his arm with both hands and clawed their way down his arm. But why? Why 11? Who has 11 fingers? They decided to head back to the car to treat Dad's arm, but the path had disappeared. The path that they'd followed many, many times was just gone. But how? They walk around to make sure they haven't just wandered further into the woods than normal, but nothing. No trace of a path being there at all. After a while of climbing through the woods, they finally stumble across the car, right next to the path that just minutes earlier wasn't there. They quickly get in the car and start driving back to Brighton. As they drive, the car suddenly gets surrounded in a thick fog that appeared out of nowhere. It was getting thicker and thicker until a car came driving in the opposite direction. Then as quick as the fog came, it was gone. Once home, they do some research on some of the witches of Burley, and it's said that one of the women was tried as a witch because she had 11 fingers.
Ooh.
Isn't that good? All of this was documented and Dad put onto a VHS, so I need to try and convert it into digital and send it in to you. Yes, please.
100%.
About 15 years later, I started to go along with them. This time we had... I love that. I'd love that. We would have bonded. Yeah, we would have bonded a lot sooner if my mum and dad taking me ghost hunting. About 15 years later, I decided to go along with them. This time we headed to All Saints Church in Minstead, New Forest. This is where Arthur Conan Doyle, author of Sherlock Holmes, was laid to rest. As we pulled up to the church, we noticed that the doors to the church were open. They're always closed overnight, usually. As our eyes adjusted, we noticed a very tall black figure standing in the doorway. Dad shone his light right into the doorway to make sure that someone hadn't broken in, but as the light clicked on, the figure was gone. My dad, sister and brother-in-law all took an EVP each and headed to separate parts of the church and graveyard. Myself and my mum waited in the car as it was too cold to be walking around outside at 3 a.m. 10 minutes into their session, me and my mum heard a massive bang on the roof of the car. I jump out to check that, thinking maybe a tree branch had fallen, but there was absolutely nothing there. No trace of anything falling whatsoever. Slightly creeped out at this point, I get back in the car. It was at this point that I noticed my sister come running back to the car looking terrified. "What's wrong?" asked Mum. "It's easier to show you than tell you." She pressed play on her EVP recorder, and at first all you hear is her breathing and her footsteps. But then all of a sudden you hear the bang from the car, followed by a deep growl.
Oh.
Shortly after, my dad and brother-in-law returned to the car with the same experience. Now, bear in mind, they were nowhere near each other, so there was no way that this would pick up the same thing, but it did. That deep growl at the exact same time on all 3 recorders. A few years later, Dad ended up being wheelchair-bound due to an accident at work, so we had a stair lift put in at home. In August 2020, Dad passed away at the age of 48 from a double brain hemorrhage, which is awful. I'm very sorry.
Sorry.
Since his passing, every day the stair lift will begin with a beep, click. It will then move by either a foot or will travel all the way up or down the stairs, beeping and clicking the whole time. Mum's had all types of electricians, engineers and council workers out to figure out why it keeps moving. But every single time they say there's no fault with it. They must think she's crazy, but we've all witnessed it. I wonder why Dad keeps trying to grab our attention. Or is he just having a bit of fun in the spirit world? Thank you for taking the time to read this, and I apologise for how long it is. Please don't.